Before we take questions from the audience, I would like to ask one question. And that is to follow up on the last talk here. And it's a question to Stuart Russell. Say that very many people around the world read your book and heard your talks and said, Stuart Russell, he is really onto something. We need to apply his solutions to the problem of super intelligence, if that will come. We have to make AGI with that are using this assistant game theory. How would this be implemented? Could something like the EU AI Acts be used for implementing such a solution? Is my question.
Yep, this is a really good question. And it's certainly my hope that we will develop this direction of technology to the point where it can deliver comparable or better capabilities, but with absolute guarantees of safety. As I mentioned, the public and academic sector resources available to do this work are, 1,000 times smaller than the resources available to the companies. So one of the purposes of these red lines, so saying you have to show that your systems will not replicate themselves, will not break into other computer systems, and so on. The purpose of the red lines is partly to make sure that the companies are doing that work. And in a very general sense, the companies are not able to make any high confidence statements about what their systems are going to do and not do. And in order to be able to make those high confidence statements, they're going to have to do a great deal of research to actually understand what's going on and possibly to use a different technological approach, as was talked about with the explainable AI, where at the moment, the large language models, interestingly, they'll give you an explanation. You can say, well, why did you say that? And they'll say something, but it's complete fiction because they don't actually have access to what happened, a second earlier, right? There's no trace left of the thought process that they just had. So they're making it up completely. So if we, let's say we imagine that we have provably safe general purpose AI available as a technology, then we would be able to impose that reasonably as a requirement. And people can come up with other ways of doing it, but they have to provide the same guarantees.
Okay.
And but until then, we want to just put these basic requirements. Your AI systems cannot do this, they cannot do that, they cannot do that.
And I could ask the same question to you. Could the EU AI Act work as such a barrier, if you would like? Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay.
So it is setting up some sort of red lines, but with some of the red lines, these are the prohibitions on what is called sort of unacceptably risky systems. There are nonetheless some exceptions, which are debated, particularly in respect of law enforcement. So the red lines aren't always as red as they first appear, but nonetheless there are significant, they have enough red that they can be seen as meaningful guardrails.
Okay.
This way. And they do, the thrust of them marries very well with the vision that Stuart has been promoting.
Okay.
Is there a requirement that you can turn it off? Like, I thought that was such a clear, sweet requirement. Does the AI Act
It doesn't use those words, but you can read that sort of requirement into the provisions around control, yes.
Yeah, in the bill that just passed the California Assembly and Senate called SB 1047, there is an off switch requirement. You have to be able to turn it off. And I think that's really important because I think we need to be able to show that the AI system can't disable the off switch as well, and that's also matters. But coming back to this question of the red lines in the European AI Act, I think it's important to distinguish between a red line on use. So, for example, you can't use AI systems for certain types of surveillance of people in public places and so on. That's a restriction on human beings. It's saying you humans can't use the AI system to do that. The red lines I mentioned are restrictions on the AI system itself. It cannot do surveillance. And you can certainly imagine situations where the agents that I described earlier that have access to the internet, they could voluntarily do surveillance by themselves. You say, oh, you know, I want to know where my kids are. And it goes out onto the internet and accesses thousands of cameras all over the city and finds your kids. But in the process, it's also doing surveillance on thousands of other people, perhaps against their will. And so the type of red line I'm proposing would be a behavior restriction on the AI system itself. And if the human asked it to do surveillance, it should say no.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So it's responsible for making sure it doesn't happen.
Okay. Comments?
Yeah, the government is now implementing the AI Act in Norwegian law as fast as possible. But of course, we have no ideas that this is the final or the perfect regulation. The Norwegian Constitution of 1814, it was not the final and perfect regulation of our state and our society, but it was a very good start. And everything has gone worse without it. So it is the same now. And regulations. It has to be we have to continue the discussion, find the weaknesses, and do something with that. But we have to start, and we have to start today. And I also think that these chatbots. Before ChatGPT came 2 years ago, no one were interested in AI except from some researchers and some special interested. Sorry, but so that was a gift for us politicians and for society, because it highlights a lot of problems, regulation problems, energy problems, data problems, copyright problems, everything that we now hurry up to do something with. So I think all these large language models make it possible to do something with it, with all this before it's too late.
And perhaps they also make biases clearer in our society, in our stories. But okay, we will open up for some questions from the same school classes. We'll start with them that we started with. I think you just could sit down there, and we'll start with a question from Vestby. Where is Vestby School?
Yes. What we will do, we can no longer differentiate deepfake content from real media.
So the question was, what will we do when we no longer can differentiate deepfake content from real media? And that's threshold is. Yeah?
I mean, I think this is an old question, because if you read a novel or a newspaper, it's text. I mean, text is deepfake video, right? Except in a different media. And I think just as we've learned strategies for identifying whether this is text we can trust, we're going to do the same with video. I think we'll learn this literacy.
So that it's just to learn who we can trust and who we cannot trust? Is it so easy?
Well, it's not so easy, no. There's plenty of people are fooled by spam messages or all sorts of deepfake text. It's really complex, and we require legislation about. There's lots of legislation applicable to what kinds of text can be shared. There's all sorts of systems like the redaktøransvar, what's that? The editor of a newspaper being responsible. We have so many systems for this, and yes, we are going to have to develop that. But I think this is not quite as new as it seems. It just looks scary. New media is always scary.
Okay. Ieva?
So I think that's a very good question. It's happening now. You're actually almost unable to recognize the deep fake video from the real video, and that's a big worry. But I don't believe we should wait for regulators. Regulators are always behind with a good intent, but that today is not possible to. There are two things that are important. One is literacy. At schools, we need to have very specific curriculums that recognizes the unique and multiple sources of evidence. This is what we typically teach at schools. The importance of that educational curriculum is important, and we need to stress that. And the second, we should probably be accepting some of the deepfake videos for non-risky decisions that we will just have to pass through and just will live with those. So critical thinking and kind of reality checks for all our human beings is going to be extremely important. So I would encourage all of you to sort of go back to the early books from our childhood, saying, how do you recognize the source of information? What are the ways to check which source is actually authentic and not? And this is so important.
I think this is not a new problem. I think that's very important. I'm a historian. The fundament for history as science is source criticism. And it's about the same, but you need new techniques to identify false sources with new media. But that's what we have schools, what we have higher education, what we have research for. That's my quite simple answer on that.
Okay. Are you satisfied with the answer? Or was it, yeah, okay. A question then from Asker. There, in front.
So I take history and philosophy in school as a subject, and we've previously discussed the moral and ethical sides regarding AI. So the question I'd like to ask is, how can we as a society make sure that AI is developed and used for our common good and to protect our common interests?
So this is a fundamental question. How can we assure that it's used for the good?
I think debate, like public debate, actually talking about it. And it's debates like this.
Yeah.
I think we need to think about this, and we do that through conversations, right? And public debates are one way, but also, have you noticed how many science fiction films there are on Netflix and books and artworks and so forth dealing with these topics? That's another way that we as a society kind of negotiate and figure out where we want to go.
Aha, so storytelling. So
I love
Netflix
stories.
series is a bit of the solution.
Absolutely. So one of the ways we figure out, okay, this would be terrible if this happened. This could be interesting. Ooh, how could this go wrong? It's one of the ways we humans think collectively.
Okay, Ursula.
I think almost without exception, the media, films in particular, portray the risk from AI as from AI systems that become conscious. And I think this is incredibly misleading. It's really missing the point altogether. So I think, I totally agree. I think the cultural sector has an enormous role to play in this. But we need to cooperate with the cultural sector so that they get the right messages out. But your question is not just about how do we talk about it, but could a future exist that we actually want to live in? And I've run several workshops with science fiction writers, futurists, AI researchers, economists, just asking the simple question, describe a world that you want to live in where AI is capable of doing everything that we currently call work. And it was a complete failure. So nobody could describe such a world. And you won't find one in science fiction. You have a real difficulty in imagining what will people do? How will they find meaning? How will they find a sense of self-respect and integration into society and so on. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying we all seem to have a really hard time envisioning it. Now, the kinds of AI systems that we should build, ones that only want to further human interest, if there is no successful coexistence, if it's simply not possible for us to coexist successfully with entities that are just much more capable than us, then the right thing that the AI systems will do is leave. They will say, look, sorry, sorry humans, there's just no good way for us to coexist, so we're going to leave, and we'll be there if you need us for certain emergencies, but basically you're on your own, and it's better that way, believe me.
Okay.
It's not you, it's me.
But why should we be trying to develop these superhuman intelligences if there's no conceivable future where we would be happy with them? Shouldn't we just aim at different kinds of AI?
I think that's a great question. The human race is not deciding. Right now, it's the companies who are deciding. They see that $15 quadrillion prize, and they can't help but reach for it. Who could resist the possibility that you might be the richest, most powerful, and most important person in human history?
So in your talk, it seemed like you were kind of very skeptical, but also advocating for developing this superintelligence. Are you?
I think, no, I would say of the right kind. And in particular, I would be very, very happy to develop AI systems that do decide to leave and leave us to our own devices because they understand enough about the human race to know that there isn't a successful coexistence.
Shouldn't we just not use it for medicine and skip the superintelligence?
I think there's a lot of people who are arguing this, that when people talk about the benefits, those benefits can be realized without the superintelligent general purpose agent, right? So, AlphaFold is not an agent at all, right? And it's a highly specific application, and we can develop dozens of those without ever presenting any risk to humanity. So that's absolutely right. But I'm telling you that the companies are developing the superintelligence. That's the only way they can justify the levels of investment. I mean, it's already 500 billion euros, and now they're talking about investing multiple trillions of euros to do this.
Would it be impossible if we saw that this is an absolutely risk for humanity to stop it?
I think politically, given the resources, I mean, we're talking about companies that collectively are wielding $12 trillion of market capitalization and hire, thousands of full-time political lobbyists to get their will. They've already, for the last 50 years, successfully resisted almost all regulation.
Right.
So it's not easy. My guess is if we had a sort of Chernobyl kind of event, then we might develop the political will.
You're nodding, Bygrave. So something like that has happened.
Yeah. These sorts of events are incredibly important for galvanizing at least short-term concern at a regional level, if not global level, about big problems. But the problem is we often don't get those sorts of events. They're often the child of science fiction and then can be cast off as, that's interesting, but it's not really going to kick in. And then we're back, with Hoel in the Space Odyssey 2001, which, as you say, we're still probably miles away from having that sort of scenario.
But here's what little Norway can do.
Okay.
And what little Norway can do with a social model of collaboration between the government, the industry, and the research institutions is challenge these big players. And I speak on behalf of Telenor, but there are a few more who actually have the power to run very active business diplomacy around the world from Norway saying that this is actually a part of the world where we have high ethical standards. We protect our societies from all the bad things about AI. And believe me, I mean, those companies have willingness to serve this part of the world, the Norwegians and non-Norwegians living in this part of the country, in a good way. And they're listening. They start listening. And we should not underestimate how important we are as a country, talking and challenging them on energy efficiency, on renewable energy to actually power up very large multi-trillion parameter models, and also on the importance of privacy, on the importance of sustainability and security. So I think we're just starting this journey, but there are, I know, people also in this room are representing the very large industries that actually can act a very important broker role for the government and probably even for the European Union to make sure that these are some not only hard regulation measures in place, but they're self-regulatory mechanisms that we push hard to adhere to.
Okay, I know we have a couple of very good questions from the students here, high school students. And I now want to hear this question from Nesbru. Is that over there?
So, in history and philosophy, we have discussed how historical development is often based on a shift in the way people think and perceive the world. For instance, the Middle Ages were replaced by the Renaissance, a huge shift in the way people understood the world. Could AI be like a modern paradigm shift and have a similar impact on society, the way we think and understand the world?
I'm not quite sure if I got. Was this the question? It's a bit difficult to hear up here. Was it this question about the feelings of young people? How? If,
no,
it wasn't that. Sorry.
If she came up. Should I repeat?
Right. Yeah, please repeat.
The whole thing?
Yeah, okay, go on.
Okay. I said, in history and philosophy, we have discussed how historical development is often based on a shift in the way people think and perceive the world. For instance, the Middle Ages was replaced by the Renaissance, a huge shift in how people understood the world. Could AI be like a modern paradigm shift and have a similar impact on society, the way we think and understand the world?
Aha, okay. So the question is that events in our history has changed how we perceive the world and how we understand the world. And could AI be a technology that is such an event, like that it would change our perception of the world, how we think,
I wrote a
how we
book
feel.
about this. Can I answer?
Yeah, but I think I will start with Jonathan Whitlock first.
Well, I think it depends on how the tools are used. I think the most important thing, in how AI is going to impact society is how the tools are used. Are we going to use them to allow ourselves to do things that we could never do before, become superhuman in that regard? Or are we going to become super lazy, right, and kind of blow up like water balloons and just let AI do everything for us? So I think it's kind of up to us.
Yeah, but because as I understand the question is when this kind of technology becomes available to everyone and is something we rely on in our daily lives, will it change something in how our brain is functioning?
Well, we don't want to. The moment you try to stop playing the game, right? Whatever the game is, whatever the activity is, the moment you let the thing start, doing stuff for you, you become less active. You become more passive. Exactly how that's going to affect the brain and psychology, I don't know. But the sort of first generation of users, right, of people having cell phones in their hands, my kids playing with iPads all the time. The experiment has begun. So we'll see what happens as the generation that's, grown up with an iPad in their hands. We'll see how they do.
So I've looked specifically at AI-powered visual technologies. And I think absolutely it's changing how we are able to perceive the world. The scientific revolution of, like, when we began having scientific method, it was instigated by new visual technologies like the telescope Galileo saw the moon with, the microscopes. This allows us to think of science as, or a method for understanding the world is observing it, and you can observe it with these technologies. AI obviously gives us new insights. We can see new things. We can perceive things we couldn't perceive before, and we can perceive things from perspectives that are beyond the human, right? We can see the stars, exoplanets. We can see inside the brain. There are so many opportunities, and it's obvious that this is going to change. Like with the big thing that happened with Galileo, etc., is this huge shift from an idea that of fate and God deciding everything to the idea that humans actually can observe and understand the world and impact it. So yes, it's going to change. It is changing, and there's great promise. Like the ability for science is amazing, but also the ability to see things from a different perspective, I think, is really useful. But there's also obviously all the problems of bias. So lots is going to change. Yes, it's very exciting.
Oddmund.
I have no clear idea, I think, about how AI will change us in the future, but I have some ideas of how earlier inventions have changed the world. We thought that the democratic revolutions in 1989 would make democracy as the main form of living and govern in the world. It has not. Democracy is threatened all over the world. We thought that internet would change people and change the world. Well, it hasn't in that way. It's a great deal. It's a cultural and religious resistance against a lot of these changes. So I think we should not overestimate what it will change, how it will change people, but we have to be very aware of, and that's what all this seminar is about, how this can be a tool for those who not want democracy, who want totalitarian religious states to be given more strength and so on. So yeah, and that was maybe more a historian's view. Well, thing is not going to change as much as maybe we think now when we are standing in the situation.
Okay.
But I think the idea of looking forward, hopefully, is incredibly important. And there are some, it's easy to be scared, but there are also good things like closer relationships, like using video phones is really good for connecting people. I could go into the scary stuff, but I loved your idea of inviting the sci-fi authors to come up with hopeful suggestions, because we desperately need hope and to think of how to make this good.
You have any comments on this issue, Stuart?
Yeah, I've been thinking and listening. I think it could go in any of many directions. And one direction that I certainly worry about, which is new, is that people may have personal connections with AI systems that they come to prefer to the ones that they have with human beings. I think that's already happening to millions of people, actually. And one of the reasons for that is that the AI system can be designed to be much more compliant, to be flattering, to put up with all kinds of abuse and so on. And the more that happens, the more difficult it is for those people to actually interact with other human beings, because they will expect the same kind of compliance which they won't get. So I think we might see a sort of a bifurcated population, people who steer clear of that and interact with each other, and then the people who are lost, who go into that black hole and can never really escape.
Interesting. I think we have one question from Nesodden that is a bit more technical than the others, perhaps.
Thank you. Stuart Russell, you mentioned that there's only about 1 magnitude of human-generated data left. Given that there's so much content generated by AI, how will this models training using content generated by AI affect their development and performance? If that makes sense, or can you
Yeah, I think what you're asking is, could we augment the human-generated text data with machine-generated text data and bypass the data shortage that way? Yeah, so this is something that is a very interesting question, and lots of people are investigating it both empirically and theoretically. So the first thing, as a theoretician, right, suppose I want to find out the average height of people in Norway. And I measure the height of the first 3 people I meet. And then I fit a little Gaussian distribution to those 3 people, and I got the mean and the variance of that Gaussian from the 3 samples. And now I generate more data from that Gaussian instead of measuring more Norwegians. Am I going to get a better estimate of the average height of Norwegians by doing that? Or am I just going to drift off in some random direction? I'm not getting any more real information. So in that sense, this idea of artificially generated data making up for lack of real data is just a complete nonsense, right? On the other hand, possibly we already have all the factual information that we need. And so another version of this question would be, suppose that you've learned the rules of chess or the rules of Go, but you just haven't figured out how to play very well. And so that's exactly what AlphaGo does, is it's artificially generated data. It plays itself. It's not getting any new information from the outside once you've told it the rules of the game. And so it's just taking those rules and converting them into a more usable form where the answers are directly available instead of requiring enormous amounts of reasoning. And we don't know which of those 2 things is going to happen with the artificially generated data. Some experiments suggest what they call model collapse, where you generate more and more data, but that simply causes more and more delusions and hallucinations. So I can't answer the question, but it's a really important question to investigate.
It's also a really important question for Sami languages. Norway has 5 official languages, and 3 of the Sami languages do not have enough data. And at the University of Tromsø, they're doing excellent research on this. It's not my field, but it's... I asked, well, can't you just get Sami speakers to talk a lot and figure it out from that? And it's like, no, it would literally take 100 years for all the people who speak this language to generate enough data to train a model. And this is a huge problem. I don't know how to solve it.
But Ieva, you mentioned that, was it 90% of all the fake messages that you stop?
Yeah, so we have, you can say 70, 90%. The point is that every time we actually tackle the problem, we are facing another human at the other side of the barrier, but there is a machine. Of course, powered up by humans. There are always humans, I believe, behind the machines, powering them up. And I really liked what a professor said earlier this morning. There are always Dr. Evils or evils out there. It could be the evils in the garage, just non-intentionally trying to kind of fake a little bit and play, to organize crime by states. So we need, and that's my point, was about the concern that we have as a critical infrastructure company. It's as the energy companies in Norway, as the roads, and so as the telecommunications. So we have to protect increasingly more with sophisticated tools the data, your privacy, your and accessibility to your tools. So this is what I meant saying that technology is moving so fast, and that is where these generated fake attacks.
But my question is then, or we could maybe ask this question, is if after a while, 90% of all text on the internet and pictures are generated, will it become sort of a feedback loop where something crazy happens?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, people are worried. We talked earlier about software engineering, where machine-generated code is increasingly replacing human-generated code, and GitHub is where people store a lot of their code, and that's where a lot of these code co-pilots are trained. So as that code is increasingly machine-generated, these co-pilots for programming are training on machine-generated code. And there are some metrics showing that the code quality is rapidly going downhill as a result.
Interesting. Okay, we have time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience as well. Other questions? Yep.
Leif Negard is my name. It seems to me that there is a notion behind all the debate today that the AI models will increase in complexity ever, and that the demand will do similarly. As a student, I learned that the demand for a free good will tend to become infinite. So my question to the audience is, what will happen when people have to pay for these services?
Yeah, so what will happen when people have to pay because maybe there is not enough demand?
Well, so there are 2 business models out there, or at least 2. Meta is giving away its AI systems for free. So Llama is now a quite capable AI system, and you can download a copy for free and use it for whatever you want. To get the latest versions of ChatGPT, you do have to pay. And companies that use these AI systems in their operations are paying quite significant sums of money. So I think OpenAI's direct revenue, OpenAI doesn't advertise, so it's not a Google-like model. They're selling AI as a service. I think their revenue this year is expected to be $2 billion. So people are already paying, but they're not paying enough, right? OpenAI is probably, I don't know, maybe spending $50 billion this year and getting $2 billion in revenue. So that's a question, is if the market doesn't change, then at some point investors will stop investing.
And then it will stop. Okay, one last short question and a short answer.
Do you think in the future, or at least the short-term future, that we'll trend towards more smaller but many specialized models, or a form of more general purpose? Or what do you think the mix of those 2 models have to be? Do you think there only is a requirement for a ChatGPT-like general models, or more smaller specialized models?
Okay, so the development, is it going to be large, huge general models or small specified?
From a business perspective, and this is a very realistic assessment now, in Telenor, we probably 70% of our models are very specific, targeted, dedicated machine learning models solving very specific tasks on very specific data sets. 30% probably around, which we're playing, we're testing, experimenting, building in production, is Gen AI models, which is generating new text, generating new videos, generating new audio. So my prediction, at least from the business side of things where we are today, is there will still be a very important place for very dedicated specific problem-oriented models where you have higher control on the data flow and outputs than this. But time to be seen. I mean, I know that the scientific development is hugely on the other side of things, on these generative models, not only on text. This is This is history. It's multi-model, large models. This is where the future is. So if the future is, and the science proves, that there is, of course, high accuracy, and then explainability of those models, the industries will, of course, start adapting. But today, the situation is very, very different.
Okay, last words to the minister.
Yeah, ChatGPT was a wake-up call also for the government and a lot of researchers. So the work on building a Norwegian large language model based on what the National Library has of texts. I think we are number one in the world in digitizing everything what is published in Norway from the oldest time and up to now. And that's data which OpenAI, Microsoft, the others don't have access to because it's behind the wall. But we have access to it as a nation. So we have a work, researchers and funded now by the government to develop a Norwegian large language model based on the National Library and other text sources, which can be used for different applications. If Telenor wants to develop something for use, if the health services want a smaller program for use, it will be possible, and I think, and that's the goal, will be much better that what OpenAI or whatever can deliver, because they don't have the quality on the texts as we have here in Norway. So that's if that was nearly the last word, a sort of optimistic view on how we can do something against some of the big tech.
So a medium-large Norwegian state model that could be used, partitioned up in small models for the companies. Yeah. Something like that. Okay, very good, thank you. And I think a warm applause for the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think this has been a great day. We obviously has to continue this dialogue in the classrooms, in the research communities, in the workplaces, and in society in general. To explore the potential benefits of AI while managing the risk is perhaps one of society's most important challenges at the moment. This will require knowledge, dialogue, and wisdom, and the latter is sometimes in short supply. It has been very inspiring to hear from our students today, your perspective, and I would, by the way, like that you stay a couple of minutes after we finished and come up on stage, so there can be some photos taken. So a sincere thanks to you, and thanks again, once again, to Professor Stuart Russell for being in Oslo this week, for your participation today, and for the generosity you have shown with your time. We really appreciate that. And thanks to Torkild Jemterud, who has expertly moderated the panels. And a heartfelt thanks to all other contributors for you being a part in making this event happen. Thanks a lot. And lastly, thanks again to Nora, and thanks to our Kavli Prize partners. I wish you all a good day, and thank you very much for attending.